Welcome to the Conversation Cafe. Today's topic is how to be a good interfaith guest. So welcome, and as I welcome you, I'm very mindful that I am located just outside Montreal, and which is the Ganyangehaga territory. And Concordia University is located in Tiohtià:ke or Montreal, also in Ganyangehaga territory. And so we want to be mindful of that, of the First Nations who first settled the land. And then many of us came as settlers. Some of us chose to settle here ourselves. Some of us, our families came. And we really want to respect that continuous relationship with the First Peoples of our land. And if I know our guest Brian is on another territory. If you want to just be mindful of where you are on who the first settlers were, it's also a great chance to learn. I just did a bit of Googling about the first peoples of Germany, which is my native country. So it's like, I knew a bit, but I thought, what an opportunity. So I want to begin with that and also welcome you to this cafe and to one of the events of Concordia Multi-Faith and Spirituality Center. We're a place that engages students in question of spirituality and ethics, values, religion, and right now also just a place to connect, which is so important, and have human touch and human connection. And so the Conversation Cafe is a series where we try to explore interesting topics. We have guests, and I'll introduce our guests in a moment. And it's a time when we reflect or converse on a particular topic, and it's a chance to learn for all of us. It's not a place to, we don't have assignments from it, or it's not a chance to, the idea is to create safe space for brave conversations, and to learn from one another and recognize that there's so much out there that we can explore. And so welcome you to this place and to that kind of vibe, we call it. I also want to say, if you need to leave at some point, please do so. If you know you're going to leave, I love a little message in the chat. Just got to go, just so I know you didn't fall off the face of the earth or something. But we really do try to create a little bit of community by being here and learning together. And I also want to let you know the event is being recorded because many people actually watch it after. So sometimes that means people prefer to take off their camera or whatever, but that's up to you. And I also just like to, I like to do a little go around, just so that in a small way we can get to know each other. And so I just want to invite you to say who you are, tell us how you're connected to Concordia, even if this is the first Concordia event, just say that. And I just want to invite you then to say one religious space, a religious or spiritual space you would like to explore. And just like a sentence. So I'll start, and I'm Ellie. I'm the chaplain and coordinator at the Multi-Faith and Spirituality Center. And I run the program in the center. I'm often here with my colleagues, but most of them are off for in other meetings today. And one of the religious places, I've been fortunate to be at many, but I think I would love to, it's connected with travel. I'd love to be in India and go to some of the religious places there. And I'll pass that on to Rabbi Ellen.
Hi, so I'm Rabbi Ellen Greenspan, and what did you ask? I'm a rabbi educator at Temple Emmanuel Beth Shalom, which is in Westmount, although right now I'm in my apartment. What else did you want me to say? Oh, it's a place, a religious, spiritual place we want to explore. Mine involves travel too, of course. So shortly after the pandemic started, I was supposed to have left on a trip for Israel, the end of March last year. I was supposed to go to Israel. And I don't think this was on our group's itinerary, but I've been to Israel many, many times, but I have never been to the Baha'i Center in Haifa, and I would really like to go there.
And how are you connected to Concordia?
Oh, I'm a faith leader, or whatever you call it, at the Multi-Faith and Spirituality Center.
Awesome. Thanks. And you get to pass it on to the next person.
I'll pass it on to Shaheen.
Thank you, Rabbi. My name is Shaheen, as it says on my face there. in the corner. And I like to volunteer. I like to help people. And that's my passion. If I can be of service to at least one person in my life and change their life in some way, I would have achieved something. And also for the how I'm associated with Concordia, again, through my volunteering. And I was approached by Ellie many years ago. Ellie, how long was it? I don't even remember.
Don't know.
Yeah, I don't remember, and I don't want to remember because that reminds me of my age. So, so, what I would like to, the place that I would like to visit. Well, I've been to Mecca, I've been to Medina. I haven't been to the Dome of the Rock. So that's one of my three religious spaces. I'm showing four, sorry. Yeah, three religious spaces. So two of them I've visited, but the third I would like to visit.
Well, and you get to pass it on to someone.
How about Olivia Bala?
Hello, I'm Olivia. I'm actually a student rep for my church at Morsel, so I know Carlene. And I guess, well, how I'm connected to Concordia, I guess it's that way, like the interfaith space. And I actually have to second Ellie on India, because in high school, I danced on a competitive Bollywood team for 3 years. So I grew like a lot of love for that culture, like a special connection. My teacher was Indian, and a few of our friends there were Indian too. And I would love to go there one day.
Cool.
I can pass it on to, right? I'll pass it on to my friend Olivia, because I know Olivia.
Yes, we're both Olivia. It's kind of confusing. But I'm also connected through Olivia. This is my first Concordia event, actually. I've had many friends attend, though, the school. So I've gotten to know a little bit about Concordia through that way. But yeah, I'm Olivia McPherson. And I love this question because there's really so many places I would love to go, religious places and cultures, and to see them, as I haven't seen very, very many. But first that came to my mind was I'd love to go to Jerusalem and see Israel and that part of the world. That is so much history there that I would love to see. But also go to some historical places in Canada that I'm sure that exist that I don't know about, that are the Native Americans, and get to know that culture as well more, because I know I could do that. So those two places.
And you get to pass it on to someone.
Oh, yes. Brian.
Yeah, my name is Brian Caruana. I'm connected to Concordia simply through Ellie. I don't have any other known connection to Concordia. Well, my niece actually graduated from Concordia about a year ago, so that's another connection. And yeah, for places, I would say two things. I'd really like to go to India too. It's very high on my list. And the other thing is, around Toronto, I've gone into like hundreds of religious spaces, but I have never found, like I go to Wiccan covens and Zoroastrian temples. I've never found a gathering of like the Orisha traditions. I don't know if you guys have heard of like Santeria and stuff like that. I have never seen one of those rituals. I've gone looking for it, but I cannot find it. So I would really like to do that. And I'm supposed to, that's everything, right? And then I pass on. Carlene, I think you've not gone, right?
No, I can go now. Hi, everyone. I'm Carlene. I'm connected to Concordia through Ellie. I actually do a similar job to hers over at McGill, but I also did attend Concordia back when the Earth's crust was still green so many years ago. I love this question too. India is the first thing that popped into my mind too, Ellie, before you even mentioned it. But I will, instead of just repeating that, I will also add that I recently saw a documentary on sacred sites in Japan and the Shinto faith in the Kami and all of these like waterfalls and natural spaces, and that really intrigued me. So I would love to go visit Japan and see some of those shrines. And is there anyone else left to pass it to?
Noor and Julio.
Okay, I don't see everyone on the screen, so I'll pass it to Julio.
Are you there, Julio? We don't see you. That's perfectly fine, but we're hoping you can hear us.
Sorry about middle class. That's why. But yeah, I could answer like really fast. I am currently in film studies at Concordia, and to kind of ask which kind of religion I would really like to kind of explore is kind of like I really like exploring all of them: Zoroastrianism, Sikhism, Islam, indigenous and spirituality. So it's kind of like hard to kind of pick one, but I love learning from all of them. So I'm always open to learning new things, even to like study the Talmud and study like the Ayurvedas and all that kind of stuff. So sorry about that. I really wish I could like.
That's a great response, Julio. That's great. And glad lots of people are managing 2 places at once, so class and another Zoom thing. So congrats. I'm glad to have you. And Onur, are you there?
Yes, I am here.
So your turn.
Yes, my name is Onur. I'm a last year PhD student here in Concordia University. Hopefully, I will graduate soon. And for religious places, I have seen Vatican City, and I would like to see Jerusalem and India one day. These are the places I want to visit one day.
Okay, thank you, everyone. I think India is high on our list, so preview of coming attractions. Maybe we need to organize a trip. So it's my pleasure to introduce Brian again, our guest. So as Brian said, he's visited hundreds of places in Toronto, and I got to meet him when I took one of the events he organized is to Encounter World Religions, and it's the Encounter World Religions Week. And we had a week long of classes. I think we learned about 10 or 11 religions and went to 16 different places of worship. And it was probably one of the most amazing weeks of professional development and personal development I've ever done. And so I got to know Brian that way. And when I thought of an interesting guest for our cafe, I just thought of Brian and his wealth of information and his storytelling. And here he is. And so Brian, you introduce yourself as the religion geek and the executive director of Encounter World Religion. And you can Google it. It's a great organization. And he is a wealth of knowledge. I think there was nothing that I asked him that week that he did not have a response to or an answer or a way to think about it. And it was just so engaging. And one of the things I really appreciated was that we went to what I call the normal faith, but we also went to a Wiccan ceremony, a Rasta shop, and explored Little India and did just learned an amazing amount. And so today Brian and I are going to sort of do a bit of an interview style conversation, but we're hoping if you have questions, just raise your hand. Either you can raise your physical hand or your Zoom hand, and then just ask questions so we can indeed have a conversation about what makes for a good interfaith guest. So Brian, maybe I'll start out by I'm really curious, how did you even get into this I don't even line of work, but work is almost line of calling, line of passion almost.
It was all accident and serendipity, as life so often is. I ran into my predecessor, the guy who founded this center, a guy named J.W. Winland. I have a business degree. Now I have a PhD in religion. I've been in school for forever. But my original degree was in business. I worked in finance. And about 6 years into it, I quit. I thought, this is not for me. And I was going back to school to study history. I thought I'd become a high school history teacher. I was always interested in world religions. And I'd run into this weird guy who he had all these artifacts and he could talk. And somehow I found out that he could use someone part-time. And since the schooling was part-time, I just started helping him. And he took me to all these places. And, it was just shocking to me. I'd lived in Toronto for some years, but, all of a sudden you're in this Sikh Gurdwara. And in Toronto, they have enormous houses of worship. I'm sure Montreal has some really good ones too. But, the Sikh Gurdwara was, it was just endless. and then the next day you're in a Jewish yeshiva where it's a Hasidic Jewish yeshiva, so all the boys are wearing, just black and white hats and all of that. And it just felt like you were traveling through, traveling the world in this 1 week. And the key thing is that no one broke the ice for him. He just did it. He did it back in the 80s. Today, it's not that strange for people to walk into a different house of worship. But in 1985 or 87, he was from the American South. He had an accent, and he was a big man, a very large man, and heavy. And when he walked into a Hindu temple, one of these things was not like the other. But he was friendly and just said, "Hey, I just want to understand." And then he'd show up a second time and a third, and of course they quickly said, "Oh, that guy again." And that's it. And he kind of made friends. So he was just, there was a certain fearlessness, and he was always just, he came in with the right attitude, right? He communicated up front, "Hey, I'm just curious. I don't know anything. What can you tell me?" And yeah, and then people reacted very well for that. And then he became the person who opened the door for many others, including me. And now I've taken over and I get to, pay it forward, essentially. I open the door for many others.
Yeah, that certainly is true. You took us to many places in my week there. For many students, it's actually not students, but folks, it can be intimidating to walk in, and I think there's lots of thoughts go through our mind. What if I say the wrong thing, do the wrong thing, wear the wrong thing, go to the wrong spot? So I'm just wondering how you prepare people for a visit. Are there principles, or how do you go about that?
Yeah. It is good if you can Google around ahead of time about dress. There are lots of places that will ask, just FYI, there are lots of places that will ask you to take your shoes off. It doesn't matter if you've got socks or not. People sometimes worry about that. They don't care, but sometimes you have to take your shoes off because you don't track mud. Specifically, in a lot of places, people prostrate on the ground, or they put their face to the ground, so you don't track in mud. And, there's a couple places where there are some kind of dress codes around modesty. They may involve a veil, a scarf, or just, to cover your legs and stuff like that. So it is good to Google that ahead of time, or if you want to just call the place. Other than that, though, other than dress codes, then it's like my predecessor. It's all attitude. If you go in with this attitude of, I'm just going to learn, I'll try and follow what people are doing, usually someone notices that you maybe are a little lost or don't know where you're going, and they're happy to help. JW, my predecessor, used to say, everyone likes to tell their story. Most of these communities, if they're not mainstream, in particular, if they're not Christian, feel fairly misunderstood by society, feel that a lot of people don't know much about them, or they get depicted in the news. And so if they've got an opportunity instead to talk to you directly and to be able to tell you what they think their tradition is, they honestly, genuinely really like that opportunity. They kind of cherish it. So that's it. If you can figure out the dress, and as I say, you can just call if you're uncertain. But after that, just going in with an attitude of just wanting to learn and being willing to smile at people and say, "Hey, I'm new. Where do I go?" You're going to find that, generally speaking, there might be an exception. And when I say exception, I've never seen people turned away. But there's degrees of welcome, right? Sometimes people feel like, oh, it was fine that I was there. And other times people come and sort of decide they're going to be your guide through the whole thing. You know what I mean? So there's how would I put it? The kind of welcome where it's like, you're fine, but no one's paying that much attention to you, versus the one where people are sort of really holding your hand. But that tends to be the spectrum. People don't turn you away.
Huh. It's true, because we've done, and Caroline has too, done sacred, we call them sacred sites visits, or your neighbor's face. And I think in many ways, people are actually really, they are wonderful hosts just as much as, you know, we try to be good guests. They're wonderful hosts, and also very grateful that we actually care, that we, you know, especially as you say, some of the often faiths that seem to be misunderstood. And so I guess I'm just wondering if you have some stories of some good, you know, a good experience. What makes for a good experience, both for the host and the guest?
Yeah, what makes for a good experience? I mean, I think a lot about that. Some of the stuff that I do, I don't know how relevant it is if you're an individual. Like I go and, you know, when I'm trying to create the right experience, I'm looking for a combination of the architecture, whether we can observe ritual, and third is the quality of the speaker. Like I'm bringing groups. So those are the three things I'm always coordinating. Is this interesting to look at? Can we watch ritual, or sometimes even take part if people are comfortable? No one's ever forced, of course. And then third is kind of the quality of the speaker. You know, and then it just, you know, I mean, those are kind of the components essentially. I really do like, if possible. Well, Ellie, you will remember this. When I do the week, because I have people for the whole, I mean, this year my week is online. It's, you know, I talk for 2 hours in the morning. We have an interview in the afternoon with a faith guide. But when COVID's over and I can do my week properly, where we do like 20 site visits in a week, because I have people pretty much from morning to night, I pretty much chain them for the week. The beauty is I can time things. So when we go to the mosque, we go Friday for the midday prayer. So we not only see prayer, but we see the mosque packed, and we hear the khutbah, the sermon, and we eat a meal. We meet the imam, and that richness. It is different to see a building full versus empty. You know, like I also take schools around, and often we're going when a building might be fairly empty and stuff. But when I've got my week and I can bring people the bustle of a Sikh Gurdwara or a Sikh Gurdwara, you know, when it's busy and they're carrying their granth to bed, religion is human. You know, it's not doctrines. I mean, I'm not saying I shouldn't say that doctrines are a part of it, but they're only a part. There's only so much. I have a PhD, so I'm a book person. But I have to credit JW in this center with such a good way for me to learn about religion, because I've really realized how much you learn with your body. You know, I teach these classes, and I've worked in these classes for 15 years, and you know, I try to get them to be really good, and I'm always looking at the feedback forms of my classes and stuff. But every once in a while, I remind myself, you know, Brian, a year from now, they're not going to remember too much about what you said about Hinduism this morning. What they're going to remember is going to the Hare Krishna and having that guy dance with them, and, you know, eating the prasad. They give you some nice food to eat. That's what they're going to remember, you know, 5 years from now. And it's true. You learn with your body. And so that's, I don't think I would have naturally come to that. But the beauty of this center was that was the way I was introduced to religion, was the bodily experience of walking into places. I'm rambling a bit, but if you can give me a bit more leash. There's a Hindu temple in Toronto. It's my favorite site to go to in all of Toronto. And the beauty of this site is when I bring you in, Ellie, I'm sure I probably said this with your group. I often bring people in. I have a little milk crate. You know, those little milk crates, I put it upside down and I stand on the milk crate. So I'm a little bit higher. I'm vertically challenged. And I turn around and say to the people, where is the front of this room? And everybody looks around and goes, no one knows. There's no front, because it's not built on the model of a synagogue or a church where there's a platform and a speaker and people sitting and listening and responding. It's based on shrines. It's a pilgrimage place. You go from shrine to shrine to shrine around the floor. But that moment of just, this is completely different, is such a rich learning opportunity. You can't easily convey that in a book. But when you can get someone into that Hindu temple on the far side of Toronto, they'll remember that visit, I think, for 7 or 8 years, or even longer.
That's so true. And it also makes a religion not just something on paper or some dogma that we discuss about dress codes most of the time.
Yeah.
But it becomes human. It's human beings, and we see it alive. And yeah, I remember that Hindu temple. That was quite amazing.
Yeah, I like that place.
Yeah.
I often say that religions are, one of the things we don't pay enough attention to is they're partly aesthetics. There's an aesthetic to that Hindu temple. You go in there, and if I get you in there when there's a lot going on, there's bells ringing, they're really loud. There's a priest who's bare-chested throwing milk on an image, pastel colors of every hue of the rainbow, incense. There's a guy in the corner with fire chanting, and over here there's a pile of bananas. You're like, wow, like that does not look like, a Methodist church. Like it's completely different. And then later in the week on Friday, I take the people to the masjid, to the mosque. And I often tell them, look at the aesthetics in this place, compare it to that Hindu temple on Monday, because the mosque has an orderliness to it. The piety has emphasizes a quietness. There's no images. Of course, there can be beauty on the walls, but it's writing, it's calligraphy, it's ordered patterns. I often say, I hope this is just me, take this with a grain of salt. At the same time that there's a visual beauty, there is almost like a visual silence to go with the idea of the way you come to prayer. You come somewhat mournfully to prayer, to the call to prayer, and it has its own beauty, but it is such a different aesthetic than the pile of bananas and the bells going off.
Like meditation.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's not that different from when we go to the Zens. The Zens are they have a couple brightly colored statues, but other than that, it's beige colored walls and brown pillows, straight ordered lines, and it creates a different aura, a different aesthetic, and different ways of expressing piety or devotion or spirituality.
Yeah, you say many of us don't remember the lectures. You're right. I don't remember all the stuff you said, but I do remember the way you thought about religion. That was really helpful.
Thanks.
But the other thing when you talk about being human is those of us who are the visitors also bring a humanity and in our values. I know when I went, there were, some of the places, we also had lots of discussions on the bus when places where women and men were separated. Yeah. And I'm just wondering if you've ever sort of been in a situation where like people are, I don't even know how to ask the question, but I tell you what's in my head. I watched The Amazing Race, which is a reality TV show. And one time this group of, racers, they go all over the world, and they went to this amazing Hindu temple, and they had to, I think, bring an offering to the priest or something. They walked in and gave the priest something. It was all staged, of course. And there was one of the racing couples, like pair, that was like, oh, what an amazing opportunity. And the other one went, oh, but we're Christians, we can't do that. And it just sort of stuck with me. And I guess my question is sort of, have you ever been in situations where you either were personally challenged or were participants sort of were challenged in how they could participate? You know what I'm trying to get at?
Yeah. Yeah. And a lot of that, a lot of it has hinged in my experience around gender. Because in the secular world, we don't always execute this, but there's at least kind of a stated ideal that places should be open to all, regardless of gender. But in some religious spaces, there's a segregation, and so sometimes that has caused discomfort. There's all I'm able to say to people is, first of all, feel free to ask about that. One of the things I do stress to my groups, sometimes people feel like you can't ask a tough question. And I always say, no, that is definitely not the case. In fact, some of these places want to hear your tough questions so that they can respond instead of, again, getting it from CNN. But it's all about tone. you can ask the toughest question in a respectful tone, or you can, do the same in a dismissive way. So the one thing I say to folks is, ask that question. And I'm always in a bit of a funny spot because I'm a guy. And so I don't experience that stuff, and I don't have the lifetime of experiences of knowing what that's like, right? I can try to empathize, but it's secondhand and not firsthand. So the first thing I say is, feel free to ask any questions you want, including tough ones. Just, be mindful, think about your tone, which most of my folks would do naturally anyways. And then the second thing I say is, during the week, you don't have to like everything. And you sometimes, this happens to me. I've been in sessions where someone answered a question, the guide, the host answered a question about some controversial topic and said something that, I've been doing this for 20 years, so this doesn't happen regularly, but there have been moments of, the face palm, right? I'm like, I can't believe they said that. And I'm in a different spot because I have to know these people, and some of them I even consider my friends. And then, some topic comes up and you're like, I did not know that they would say that. And I'd rather not know that they were going to say that. I also know there's more to them than that, but that happens. And I think it's okay to sometimes go, all right, in that visit, I liked this and this, but I didn't care for that. And that's okay too, I think.
Yeah, that's really affirming, because I think it also helps me reflect on what I believe, and why like gender is so important to gender equality is so important to me, or how I'm not even aware of that. So it really is a good chance for reflection. And you said earlier a word about comfort, or, and I think we live in this world, that's certainly my perspective, where we always are supposed to be safe and comfortable. And sometimes the best learning happens in a place of discomfort, where I'm even just disoriented if I don't know where the front is, because my place of worship always clearly has a front. So I think that actually is kind of good for us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's good. That's well put.
Thanks. Yeah. So I'm just wondering, I keep scanning if others have questions. I have tons, but I hope you have some too. But one question that came up actually in the screen is, Brian, how have you been able to pivot to offer visits during COVID?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I can't do the visits now, so everything I do is online. Yeah. So with the Discovery Week, the one thing I can keep is the guide. I can't bring you to the space, and we can't go and observe a ritual. What I do now is I send people links. I've gone onto YouTube and found, not long. I usually find, like, for when I do my Discovery Week, like Monday's Hinduism. So there'll be 2 or 3 links that are cumulatively like 15 minutes, never more than 15. I don't want people watching for an hour or something and then listening to a lecture. So it allows people to see a ritual, to have someone go into a temple, on Judaism Day. One of the clips, honestly, is tradition from the, Fiddler on the Roof, because it fits my class. I talk a lot about tradition. So I use the clips to bring in little bits of ritual, sometimes someone talks personally. The Hindu Day, I have, there's a couple young kids and they have a home shrine, and they're talking about what they do at their shrine. And they're like, I don't know, 11 and 8, they're cute. But you also get to see someone in their home and hear their personal experience. Then I teach a class, and then in the afternoon, I can bring on, one thing that I've gained is I'm not bound to location. Yeah, so I've from the guide perspective, I've oddly gained, and then I do bring in some videos, but I can't, I can't bring you into that temple and have you hear the bells and see the bananas. That part is inaccessible. And of course, the event there's other benefits. It's cheaper, and like when I did it last year, I had someone from England take part and someone from Alaska who probably, to come to the personal event, you've got to fly here and take a week off of work or whatever. And, this one is like, now I can tape them. And if you're busy, you can watch it at night and stuff. So I keep saying, the COVID taketh and giveth and it taketh away at the same time. So we've gained some things and lost some things.
Yeah, that's very true. The silver lining in spite of it all.
Yeah.
Right. Just does any of you have a question? Whether Shaheen gives you a thumbs up. Anyone would like to ask Brian a question? Otherwise, I mean, nobody wants to speak up.
Well, I can speak, many religions follow rituals, and some people think that rituals are wrong. Okay. But what I say to them is that, because I'm involved in interfaith, so, like I say to them, okay, you know what? If somebody likes to do rituals and it gives them comfort, go ahead and do it. But if you don't like it, don't do it.
Yeah, that's very
the
good.
only thing is that do not look down upon the person. If you're somebody who doesn't want rituals and thinks it's wrong, do not look down upon the person who likes rituals and wants to do them. That is the main thing, not looking down thinking, oh, I'm it, my religion is it, my belief is it, and yours is nothing. That is the worst thing a person can think about others.
That's really good, Shaheen. I'm glad you said that. Yeah, I actually teach sometimes an introductory class. It is part of my introduction of the week where I talk about this very thing. I call it the Protestant lens. That those of us who live in the West, it doesn't matter if you're actually Protestant. You can be Catholic or Jewish or atheist. Most of us, by virtue of growing up here, have to greater and lesser extents been shaped by a Protestant bias. And the Protestant bias is that ritual is just rote superstition, and that real religion is it's about beliefs and books. I call it the two B's. There's actually 4 points, but those are the two big ones. It's about, because the Protestants were reacting against Catholic control of the Mass and stuff, and they swung the pendulum hard the other way and said, well, it isn't the sacrament that saves you, it's belief. And where is real religion? It's not with priests, it's in a book. And I often say to Westerners that this will hinder your ability to understand other traditions. Keep that lens on when we're talking about Protestantism, but you won't, they're not helpful in other traditions. A lot of traditions, there's been some great scholars who've written on the thing you're talking about, Shaheen. In a lot of traditions, ritual is seen not as like, the negative view is that ritual is just rote and not using your mind. And so it's like, not smart, or it's not freely chosen. So it's like you're a robot or something like that. But in a lot of traditions, ritual is understood as a teaching device that by engaging in the ritual every day, it schools you, right? It schools you, bowing when you pray. It matters what you do with your body, to put your nose to the ground as you say, Allahu Akbar, God is greater than me, greater than my accomplishments, greater than my worries. And I think that process of doing that thousands of times by the time you're 15 does something. If I can go a bit longer, sir, I'm really realizing how much I ramble today. I'm putting together a presentation that one of the components is on Confucianism. And Confucius was really big on this idea that ritual is a school. It's not just about doing the ritual. Like a musical performance, he says this, he compares it to music, it's doing it well. We can probably all sing. I sing very poorly. You will not like it, right? But there's maybe one of you or someone who can just, they embody the music, or an actor. Right? An actor has a script. He's just performing the script. It's rote. But you know what it's like when the actor lives that script, right? And Confucius talked about ritual like this. It wasn't just about doing it. It's that you had to have the right comportment, the right posture, the right look on your face. And the only way you could do this really well is if you internalized it, right? That if you hone your body like this over and over, you will form your character. And yeah, I think that's what ritual, it does other things too. It's also familiar, and rhythms give us comfort and structure. But part of it is it can be a school for forming the self. Sorry, I'm really talking long today.
This is really super interesting, and I think I see some nods, you're making us think, but Mark's giving you the thumbs up too. Carlene, did you have a question? And Alan, maybe too? Go, Carlene.
So thank you, Brian, for like these super interesting reflections on ritual and everything. You got me thinking when you were talking about kids or growing up and doing a certain motion thousands of times by the age of 15. I'm curious if you've been able to shed any light on children's and youth programming when you're visiting places of worship. Again, through the Protestant lens, those are often very separate things. There's big people's church and little people's church, usually in the basement. So how have you been able to find a way to maybe get a glimpse into what it's like to grow up in a particular tradition, especially with our university students? I mean, their teenage years are not that far behind them.
Right. Yeah, it does vary widely. Like most places do have some extra programming for youth that, the equivalent of like a Sunday school. You go to the Sikhs and they have this little school and you can learn to play the instruments and then learn often language acquisition is a big component, right? They want you to learn a little bit of the traditional language or the scriptural language. But then there are different ways they involve them. Like at the Sikhs, one of the things you notice is when you go in is the big thing for the Sikhs is feeding people. Lots of places will feed you out of a kind of hospitality, but with the Sikhs, it's actually a religious obligation. They have their tradition is not theologically, there's not lots of abstractions. They don't really have a priesthood, it's kind of lay-led, which I think has kept it kind of straightforward. And so one of the three principles is seva, which means service. And so when you go in, there are young people, teenagers, and even younger who are going around serving food. You sit down and they're serving you. And one of the schools of the Gurdwara is to learn to serve. And so I always envy them that. I think I look at those young folks and I'm like, boy, they have spent a lot of time serving people food and cooking food and cleaning other people's dishes and watching their peers do it and then being fed in turn and having someone do it to them. So that's kind of, the learn by practice. I'm trying to think what else just stands out for me. And it really is individual by tradition, like in Islam. I sometimes take people to an Islamic private school. So that's interesting because those kids tend to be particularly committed, not 100%. There's some who are there because, their parents made them go or whatever. But overall, they're a pretty high committed group. And so some of them have tried kind of to reach the above and beyond category, which is that they've learned to memorize the Quran, which is, kind of about a 2-year process of heavy involvement. So then it's like not just learning the tradition, but trying to become, trying this really difficult achievement of the tradition, right? Which I think connects you to it in a different way. And I'm trying to think what else, in Hinduism, you really come more as a family. Like there are things you can sign your kids up for. They can learn some of the songs and learn to chant and play musical instruments. But a lot of it honestly is family ritual done at home at a shrine in your house, and then sometimes going to the mandir, to the temple, and it's very ritual based. Hinduism is ritual. So they. I'm not sure if I have patterns so much. It's almost more that there's a variety of different approaches. Hinduism is as much. I actually have a friend who is Hindu. He's high up in the education system, and he always says, I don't have a religion, I have a tradition. Hinduism is a tradition, like songs and stories and practices and rites that are not even separated into kind of religious and secular, right? Some of it's, holy, like when they throw the colored powder on one another, like that's cultural as much as anything. So then it's just, the kids learn to inhabit the tradition. Yeah, so it varies a lot. I hope that was somewhat helpful.
Super interesting. Thanks, Brian. And Shaheen, you have your hand up.
Yes, I wanted to say that what you're saying is right, ritual, but in my humble opinion, rituals are there, I think, to teach you humility. I think rituals teach you humility, and because when you put your forehead to the ground, you're submitting, because this is where the scientifically where your how would you say it resides, whatever your feelings,
Yeah, your identity almost.
your being resides here. And when you put this to the ground, you're submitting your will to God's will. So that's one ritual. But I will also tell you that some rituals are very geographically cultural. For instance, the Pakistani Muslims have a lot of rituals which are copied from Hinduism.
Yeah.
Okay, so and the Arab area is different to the Indo-Pak subcontinent area. So how you practice your religion, that is I think it's geographically controlled, the by culture.
Yeah.
I just wanted to share that,
Yeah. No, I agree. I always say that no religion exists outside of its culture, and there's always there's always an exchange, often in both directions. The culture shapes the religion, and sometimes the religion shapes the culture.
I think what I find so fascinating about the encounter with religions is that those are religions that are alive in our own city. So this happened to be in Toronto, but you're right, Montreal has some amazing places. And so it's not like we go travel to India, even though we all want to go there, or most of us, and see what it's like there, sort of like a visitor. But those are people those are my neighbors. And if I go to a place that it could be across town, but it could also be just down the street. And in that, then it becomes more about understanding my neighbors and building relationships. And I guess that to me was a wonderful thing to see when I was doing that course with you, Brian, was that you, like you said earlier, you'll become friends with some of them, but we weren't just sort of showing up, hello, we're here for our appointment, please show us your place. But it was really, there was a warmth, a friendship that was really moving to see in many places. And so I guess I'm just wondering if you have some reflections on that part of the visits.
Yeah, I've been, I'm lucky, like I'm in this weird spot where I get to take people back to places over and over. And so, yeah, like a lot of these places have, a 2-decade commitment to welcoming my groups. Like it's something that matters to them, and they thank me. My groups thank me for bringing them there, but the places I'm bringing thank me for bringing people there. I'm just taking from both sides, basically. But it's true. Like, the Sikhs feeding us, like, boy, the hospitality is just over the, it's over the top. And the mosque, the imam I know, that guy would, give you the shirt off his back if he could. Like, yeah. So it's, there is, yeah. Now I'm in the spot where I do have relationships with these people. I've done events elsewhere. Like I've gone to Vancouver and done an event on a weekend, and in Calgary and places like that. And you can do it, but the internet, I can plot out the locations. I can even see pictures of the inside, so I know what kind of Buddhist temple this is. I know what to look for. But the joy of when I get to do it in Toronto, Toronto is just one of the best cities to do it. I don't mean this in a Toronto-Montreal rival. You guys have a prettier city. I've been there. It's beautiful. But for sure, it's gorgeous. My daughter goes to McGill. So she lives in, is it called is it the Plateau?
Yeah, that's possible. That's where Mark lives. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh my gosh, that neighborhood I was like, what on earth? What was I doing in university? I should have been here. But for religious diversity, Toronto is a rare city. There are, I don't know, there must be 400,000 Sikhs, and stuff like this. So, yeah. So then the ability to take people to really large places where I know people and I've known them for a long time, it is nice. They're happy to see you. They're excited that you're coming, honestly. Yeah, when I took you to the Hare Krishna place, Ellie, and there was Bhakti Marga Swami, that guy. This guy is, I'll tell you all, he has walked across Canada 3 times, including I think twice in his 60s. Kind of just, I don't know, spreading peace essentially. He's walked across the United States once across Israel. Seeing the guy has a permanent smile on his face, and so yeah, it's really nice to take people to places like that.
Wow, that's really inspiring to hear the stories, and we could probably do another whole session on interesting people you've met and stories you heard. But I am also aware that some folks have 3 o'clock meetings, and so we do need to wind down. But I just, on a closing question, Brian, what have you personally learned? Like what does it give you as a human being?
One of the things I've learned is that I don't know if this is what you're looking for, but here's what I learned. It really taught me. I tend to be an in my head person, and it really taught me that we're not as rational as we think we are. We're shaped so much by the way that we use our bodies, by the music around us, by the groups we belong to, because behaviors and emotions are contagious. You pick them up from the people around me. It's really taught me of how social and physical, and when I talk about aesthetics sounds like something you stand back from and judge like art, but I don't mean that. I mean, the body is porous, right? Things are pouring into you and going out from other people, from the music, from the incense, and it's really just made me appreciate of that our rationality is an important part of us, but I tended to think of myself as this rational person who takes in information and makes decisions and then acts. And now I'm like, yeah, that's not how it works. You're born into groups that teach you how to think. You're taught when you're a kid not to say the name of God, right? Which teaches you to think a certain way. Or when people pray, when there's public prayer, we usually change our tone of voice when we're about to pray. That tone of voice matters, right? It says something. We bow, we cover our heads, or we don't, or whatever. And similarly, people aren't religious. They're taught a different thing. Sometimes they grow up in a house that teaches them derision, teaches them to laugh and besmirch religion, which then teaches you how to think. I've just been very aware of how our life is more sociology than psychology, if that makes sense. Like you're just shaped by groups and environment. And then the brain gets dragged along at the end and goes and figures out the reasons. There is this moral psychologist who says your mind is more like a lawyer than a judge. It knows what it wants to do, and then it finds reasons to defend it, rather than someone sitting back and weighing evidence. And I think it's made me think about who I am and what a person is differently.
Wow, that's a great note to end on, because I think in a university setting, which all of us are in, it's so easy to get caught up just in your brain. And, as a chaplain, I often see that students come and they have a personal problem, like, should I move out, or, should I split up from my girlfriend or boyfriend, or what if I come out to my parents? And we, most of the time our problem solving way is to make a pro and con list and think it through, and then we're done. And it's so easy just to, and on Zoom it emphasizes that all we are is our heads, right?
Yeah.
But to actually remember that the community we're part of, the aesthetics around us, like the things we see, even how much sunshine there is, or how much snow affects us, and our bodies are so important when we enter a space, and when we enter when we're close to folks, we're different. We make decisions differently because of our body, soul, and mind. So it's maybe a great way to end, because it is 3 o'clock. But I do want to give people just I'd like to close just with one quick walk around. So I'd just like to ask people one thing they take with them from this wonderful reflection. Most of the time we could talk for hours, but this is just for us to learn something, take it with us and go, that was a wonderful, a curious conversation, or however you want to phrase it. So who wants to start with just a word or something they take with them? Just undo your mic and go.
I think I've spoken enough. I'm going to give others a chance.
Thanks, Shaheen. Olivia, Julio, Anur, Mark?
I apologize for coming in late. Oh, sorry, I cut somebody off. I saw the microphone go, sorry. I apologize for coming in late. I was on another Zoom, but yeah, just the bit was, I'm doing a 30-day sort of like, it's following poems and prayers, and that encapsulating that your background affects your steps forward in life, and especially the tone of voice. I haven't read poetry in a long time, and this guide invites you to speak it aloud. So yeah, I don't know. A lot of my background came out in that, so I really appreciated that closing point about how our histories sort of form us.
Thanks, Mark. Anyone else would like to add something? Okay. Well, thank you so much, Brian. I really, really appreciate your insight. This is not a infomercial for the Encounter World Religions, but do check out the website because it was an eye-opener, a heart opener, and I learned so much, and think back to many of the encounters we had at that week. I think I'm much richer for it, and even any opportunities we have here in Montreal to either go to spaces or even encounter people who are from a different religions, which we're doing here at the MFSC and at Warsaw. I think take that up, because I think the word is better for it, and ultimately we build peace. And Shaheen, you have your hand up.
I know. I just want to share with you a little experience of my life.
Okay, we have 2 minutes, 30 seconds.
30 seconds. I was 9 years old when I went to Vatican City. And I remember going into that place, and I was so fascinated by all the paintings on the ceiling and all that, and Jesus in chains lying there. And it was really, really very, very fascinating. So I just wanted to share that with you. Oh yeah, and my bus driver, when we were approaching that, asked my mother to cover her head with a scarf and asked my dad to take off his hat when we go inside the church. So covering of the head, like Brian was saying before, that it's a ritual that belongs to every religion.
Yeah. So lots of learning, lots of memories. And Brian also added his personal website, religiongeeks.com, and he's on Twitter as well. So they'll be on our Facebook page. It's in the chat, and it'll be on our web page. And thanks for the thank you, Brian and Ellie from Olivia McPherson. Learned so much today. I'm inspired to explore more into other religions and the history and culture behind them. That's awesome. And Julia says, thank you for talking to us. It's possible. Yes, it is possible to watch the recording. We will post that. We'll edit it a little bit, and then we'll post it. But I just want to thank you all for coming. And Brian, a huge thank you for sharing your insight and your passion. It is infectious to and encouraging to know those kind of things are taking place, because as I said a moment ago, I think they do bring about peace and change our world. So thank you so much.
Thanks for the opportunity, Ellie, and thanks for all of your time, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.